need to see, I mean, down to the nitty-gritty here in preseason, what are you looking for tonight?
I just want us to get better every day, like to see some of the things that we're working on, that we're trying to implement, start to become a little bit more instinctive for us. It's opportunities for guys to continue to perform and show how they can help the team. We want to get better. We want to move the needle every day.
You obviously have 2 games. You got to choose which goalie to play in which game. Looks like the first guy off was quick. So can you just walk us through the thinking of, I guess, Igor gets the last game?
Yeah, a lot of it's spacing.
Yeah.
Spacing between games, and so our intention is, Quickie gets the full game tonight. Jesse gets a full game on Saturday. It's closer to the opening night. So a lot of it is just spacing between the games so they get the proper rest and recovery, but also are prepared.
I don't think we've asked about a lot of young guys, fringe guys. I don't think we've asked about Roberts. What have you seen out of Roberts in this game?
I think he has a lot of redeeming qualities. He's big and strong. He can skate. He's long and rangy. By nature of that, he should be hard to play against. I think he's got a little edge to his game, but he's a mobile guy that has good size. I think, for a young defenseman, a lot of the hurdles revolves around just processing the game. I think it's the hardest position to play in the league, personally. The goaltending position might be the most important position, but playing defense is the most difficult. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of reads that you have to make when forwards make mistakes or things break down or people don't do what they're supposed to do. Then you, as the last line of defense before the net, a lot of times you have to react. So you have to process that and react. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's one of the most difficult positions to play. So as young defensemen, a lot of that is just, the processing speed of making those reads, just because of the pace of the game at the NHL level is so fast, it's so high. You've got to think and execute quickly, and so those are areas where I think experiential learning is an important element of it. The more games you play, the more you get into game real situations. You have to make decisions. You make some good ones and have success. You make some bad ones and have some failures. And you learn through those experiences, and our job as coaches is to help them through that process. And I think that's something that all young defensemen go through. And I think that's what Robertson's going through right now, but we're really excited about his potential.
The experience factor with Mara, is he a guy that, because you want him to get the rep in some of the defensive stuff we've talked about, where it's really important for him to play? Like, if he's going to make the team, you want him in the top 6 as opposed to being a scratch. Is that?
Yeah, well, I think it's a fair statement. As a young player, I think that's probably a fair statement, because it's hard to get better on the sidelines. That's not to say if someone sits out a game and they watch from above that perspective isn't part of the learning process. But if they're on the sidelines a fair amount, that's probably not in the best interest of a young player's development. So that's part of the balancing act that I think all coaching staffs and managers and hockey operations staffs deal with when they're trying to make the best decisions for their young players. And the question I think we're all trying to answer is, what path is best suited for a young player so that player can become the impact player that we hope them to be in the most expeditious fashion. So we can just throw guys into the lineup and say, figure it out, or we can try to be a little bit more calculated and more proactive in trying to influence that development process so that player progresses in an optimal way. And that I think is the question that all coaches and managers, and hockey operations groups, that what they wrestle with. And as I said to you the other day, my experience tells me that, there's no one right way or wrong way to do things. I think every player's unique, and I think all players need to be handled on a case-by-case basis with respect to that. And then we try to make the best decisions for both the player and ultimately the organization. Usually they go hand in hand. But at the end of the day, I think it's important that, you know, we try to do as good a job as we can. It's a big responsibility we have. You know, we're entrusted to help these young players become the best versions of themselves, so ultimately they can maximize their careers and help the Rangers win. So that's the goal. And so, you know, and once again, you know, my experience would suggest that with some players, they can be inserted right into the lineup at the NHL level and never look back. With other players, there's a little bit of a process. At the end of the day, we're trying to accomplish what I suggested in the beginning part of the conversation, and that is, how do we help this player? What's the best path so that they can become the best version of themselves, or another way to say it is an impact player in the most expeditious way. That's a long-winded answer, but that's what I think we're trying to answer all the time. And you know, there's no right or wrong way. There's no you know, formula to say this is the way to do it with every player. Every player is unique.
One other guy I wanted to ask you about is Parssinen, because at the beginning of camp you talked about the opportunity in front of him and how he might factor into that conscientious line that you talked about. You know, are you seeing from him like the elements that would go into that kind of role, like so far in camp and in preseason games, that would make you feel like, okay, that could be a good role for him?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's gotten better with every game he plays. You know, it's an important role. You know, it's a guy, you know, that plays that role is invaluable to helping a team win. You know, they're relied upon at both ends of the rink. You know, maybe we're not leaning on those guys as much offensively as we are, say, the top six, but we might lean on them a little bit more to put them in key situations defensively, to maybe take some of the top six guys out of those situations so that we could deploy them in an advantageous way offensively. So it's an important role. I think Pars has a lot of the attributes. He's big, he's long, he's rangy, he's strong, he can skate, he has good awareness. I think he's getting better in the face-off circle. I think he's getting more comfortable with how we're trying to play in our end, and you know, with some of the strategies and the details with our team game. I've seen him make progress.
With another guy you spoke about earlier, Sherry, you obviously have history with him. You talked about the attributes that he brings and stuff. What have you seen from him in this training camp? Like, you know, has he given you all the things that you were expecting and hoping for?
Yeah, I mean, I thought, obviously I've coached him for a while. I know his game pretty well, and I know what it looks like when he's at his best. And I think when he's at his best, and I've said this to you guys, he's a great puck pursuit forward. You know, he's a dog on a bone on the puck. He knocks a lot of pucks down. He's got a great stick. He has an offensive dimension to his game. He's shown an ability to score some goals in this league. You know, he can play on a second power play. You know, I wouldn't deem him a top six forward in this league, but he's a guy that can play in your top six if you need him to, because he has the offensive instincts to do it. But positionally, he's a pretty sound player. He sees it pretty well. You know, he's in the right spots a lot of times. There's detail positionally in his game. So, you know, what I expected we would get from him is what we've seen since the start of training camp and the games that he's played in.